Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. We are on episode 53. I am H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hi, Stuart.
Good morning, HA.
Good morning. And we have a special guest who you have heard before on our episode about Pontypool. Is that the only one that you were on, Kyle?
He did
No, I
the.
was also on Fat Zombie Falls into a Well episode
That's
of
right. That's
Walking
right.
Dead.
I knew you were on. I thought you were on a couple. So, and that's Kyle Deas, folks.
Morning.
And so we are here today to talk about the series, The Strain, as well as a little bit of a comparison to the book, The Strain. Just we're talking about the first couple episodes. But before we get into that and our zombie-related news items, just wanted to give a shout out to Squarespace, who sponsor this show. And Squarespace, as you all know, is the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own website. We use it for Reanimated. And because they are wonderfully nice people, will give you 10% off your first purchase if you type in the code zombie, and that's not case sensitive. So we encourage you to use that. And thanks again, Squarespace. So are you guys ready to hop into the zombie news this week?
Let's do it.
Definitely.
So I think in reaction to our negative reviews or our ire at the fact that they have not released much detail about the Walking Dead spinoff, clearly they reacted to that because you found a news item that gave us more detail, Stuart.
That's right. I think our voices have been heard. Kirkman really, is a fan and loves us, everything we do, of course. And so, as a gift, he gave us a small list of cast or character members for the upcoming spinoff, name TBD. And so we're looking at a couple of family units, the Cabrera family and the Tompkins family. And then we've got Andrea Chapman. He's the sixth member of the group.
Out of all the names, Andrea again? Really? Like, seriously.
Maybe it should be really horrible, and then everyone can just keep on complaining about Andrea, like, without stopping.
Or, yeah, maybe it's a do-over. Maybe she's going to be the best. Although her description is a wilted flower child, 40-something Andrea.
That doesn't give me much hope, truly.
A somewhat wilted flower child. She's not totally wilted.
Not entirely wilted.
Maybe just a couple petals here and there. But I think this gives a little bit more detail, but it's still pretty light. You have a couple of character sketches and what this is about, and clearly the thing that's jumping out here is that a large part of this cast, at least what they've announced so far, are teenagers. So what do you think about that, Stuart?
Well, yeah, it seems a little suspect because in the original cast we've got Beth, I think, is maybe the only teenager who has survived the show. Okay, spoiler alert. Gosh darn it.
Wow, Stuart, just throw in a spoiler there. Jeez.
And yeah, I guess actually this is a good time to say this entire show is going to be filled with spoilers, people. So while I'm on a roll, Beth is like the only teenager in the cast of The Walking Dead, however, unless Maggie is somehow a teenager.
Really,
maybe
last time we saw her, she was kind of bundled into a trunk and
whoa, spoilers.
Well, I thought we just did the spoiler alert.
I did a spoiler alert, Kyle. You're not just carte blanche spoilers over there. Jeez.
Anyway, point is, Beth, who knows what happened to Beth?
We don't even know if we've got a teenager in the original cast anymore. But this show has 3 of them. So, and 2 of them are related. It's almost like a Brady kind of zombie show.
A very Brady Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got Sean and Cody Cabrera, and then Nancy, and so Sean is the dad, Cody's the son, a bit of a Rick Carl potential relationship, except that Cody Cabrera is a rebellious, angry child.
Unlike Carl, it's just flowers and sunshine all the time.
Yeah, Carl's really even in his temperament.
Yeah. And then the Tompkins are Nancy, who's the mom, Nick and Ashley are the 2 teenage kids. And so comicbook.com, which reported on this story at the end of September, was like, start the shipping arguments right away with Cody Cabrera and Ashley Tompkins, matched up from the get-go.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, that ought to be fun. But I think that they're probably appealing to that audience just because the Walking Dead is a bit light on the teenage fare. So I hope it's not like Teen Titans of zombie killing or something that occurs. But we probably won't find out for another 6 months to a year more information since it took so long for this to even come out.
I think the last time I was on the podcast, we talked about the like rumored or kind of fan theory Breaking Bad Walking Dead crossover. And I think we made the point at that point that it'd be really interesting to see where this new spin-off is set, because I think, they give us a lot of information about the characters here, but almost none about the setting. And I'm much more interested to find out where we're going to see these characters hanging out. If it's just kind of the American South again and they're in the same general vicinity, like a state or two over or something from where the other survivors are in Georgia, then I think it's just kind of going to be more of the same. But if they're out in California, up in Alaska, like over, the New England area somewhere, like I think it's gonna be interesting to see, like, especially if they're in a more urban environment, what their adventures are gonna be and how they're gonna contrast to the cast members of the other show.
So you're not looking for, how the denizens of Gloucester, Massachusetts handle zombies. You're looking more for like the big urban epicenter.
I mean, we've seen a big city, basically one time in the pilot of The Walking Dead, and then for probably budgetary reasons, they have not, returned too much to large urban locations. Um, I think The Walking Dead gets a lot of mileage out of its kind of Georgia backwoods, abandoned train stations and creepy forests and all that kind of stuff. And so I just hope that the new show, like wherever it happens to be, that they kind of continue to leverage that location instead of just going for, again, kind of more of the same. If it's just being shot by, you know, the the same production crew in their off time, in the same general location. I think it's just kind of like, why would we care about these people? Like, what's going to be different about Sean and Cody than it's about Rick and Carl? But like, if they're again trying to escape from Los Angeles or New York or even Seattle or something like that, it could be
Well, the only
interesting.
there's one tiny clue in this in the descriptions of these characters, and that would be for Andrea Chapman. It says that she has retreated to the outskirts of the city to recover after a horrible marriage. So we're
Mm.
looking
The
at maybe
city.
suburban America, I think.
Well, I agree with you, Kyle. I really hope it's not Atlanta again.
Hmm.
I do hope it's a different part of the country. Although part of me thinks just because of the production costs and you know why wouldn't they try to do this in the same in the same area? But but I agree with you. I think that what would make this show interesting to me is if they had something a little bit new. Sure, it could be in the same universe, but it would be nice to see it in a different location.
Even just kind of from a plot point of view, like, they keep they keep skipping the winters, if I remember correctly. But we never really have to see the characters on The Walking Dead like cope with, like, snow or even
Exposure
that
in
much
general,
rain or
yeah.
anything. It's always just like kind of sweaty and muggy looking. Um, but if we had an instance here where, how do you deal with the zombocalypse and a blizzard at the same time, or something like that. I think I don't know, there's interesting stuff to explore, but not if it's in just kind of the same place.
All right, I'll definitely give you that.
Hmm.
So from Romania, we've got the solution to your zombie apocalypse nightmares, which is a all-terrain vehicle, all situational vehicle, I guess, that they've introduced, and it basically has it, and they showed different videos, and this is from Speed Society, and we'll have the link up in the show notes. But basically, it's an all-terrain vehicle that has these kind of like big puffy wheel additions so that it can actually go into water. Um, it has water pumps, I guess, or it can have water pumps. Pneumatic pillows on the wheels so you can float on water or hang out on the snow. Um, a plow system and all sorts of extras like that. I guess it'd be okay for getting around in a zombie apocalypse, but I think the way that the wheels are set up still sets up for some vulnerability there. What do you think, Kyle?
I mean, I was pretty skeptical of this till I watched this YouTube video here, and then I was like, okay, this thing is actually pretty goddamn amazing.
I mean, it's pretty cool looking in the video. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's what they're going for here, but
but I gotta think that it does not have the greatest gas mileage
oh,
ever. So
well,
I think
yeah.
that'd be my biggest fear is, yeah, it's great for the zombocalypse, like right until the moment where you can't start it anymore and gas pumps aren't working and stuff like that. I guess you could just, if you could get it on the water, you could like float down river like
Hmm.
pretty far, I guess. And, but
Right.
then it's not that much better than just a boat. So
Right. But this is also, I mean, this is the problem we've seen when they always show like Hummers as being the ideal apocalypse video or survival vehicle rather. Because I mean their gas mileage is a lot better than it used to be, but it's still just getting a vehicle like this to go around doesn't have a lot of distance in terms of the gas mileage that you have to find to fuel it. So
plus this video has a very kind of stirring classical soundtrack with lots of like strings and stuff, but does not actually show you what the vehicle itself sounds like. I'm guessing it's not exactly whisper quiet.
what are you talking about? Of course it
Probably going to
is.
attract a lot of attention just barreling through the
Yeah.
Romanian
Well,
countryside.
that
So,
was my guess about why they actually chose that soundtrack. So,
yeah, pretty cool, but maybe not Zombocalypse ready.
I enjoy
I
how
do
in the
like the
third photo down on the page you've got the monster vehicle, and behind it is a actually a Hummer, a Humvee, and it looks like a Chihuahua compared to it.
I know.
also like this like little like thing that it can tow. I guess it's a is it a boat or is it just like a um some kind of people carrier behind it? But that looks cold out there.
Yeah, that
It
looks
also
miserable.
looks super exposed.
Not
Maybe
good.
that's where you put your Zeds if you're like trying to lure all the zombies somewhere. You like fill that thing up with Zeds and then just drive around and let their scent waft through the forest.
Yeah, bananas. So yeah, thanks Romania.
I'm assuming you want me to
I
to
got nothing to
introduce
say
this
about
next.
this, so let's push right
Wait,
into it.
you've got nothing or something?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, well, this made me a little ill, perhaps because of what my feed generally shows me. This is something that popped up as a news item that I might be interested in. So I don't know. I find that more disturbing. What we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. There is a USA Today article about must-read romances, and apparently, and I'm not really surprised. This is, there is a series of zombie romances called Queen of the Zombie Hearts. It's pretty terrible. It's exactly what you would expect, and the cover is interesting, but and it gives a bit of a synopsis and I guess an interview with the author of these horrible books. I can assure you I will not be reading them, but in any case, it's there for your edification.
In mostly, I think they've kind of downplayed it recently, but in season one of Bob's Burgers, one of the kids has an infatuation with zombies, and they play into her fantasies. Maybe she's like the target audience
I think it's
for this
the
book.
well, yeah, maybe. And the tagline for this was all the loose ends were tied up, and Allie and Cole had to fight through zombies, tears, and sadness to earn their right to live in love. I think that's about all I really need to know about this, and all we really need to say. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have nothing. Not gonna work.
Come on, Stuart. I was hoping for your vitriol at the very least.
I I don't even have that to spare for this kind of idea. In
And
other news coming out of Scotland, is it okay for me to move forward?
oh yes, go for it.
We had, and honestly, I saw this first on a website called geek.com, which
Me
was just
too.
pointing out the fact that a newspaper in Scotland had published a story about an actual zombie outbreak, and then followed up a day later with the "this is only a spoof" concept. There are clues in the article, like if you were to call the phone number listed, it goes to a theme park which is having a zombie night. So hey, it's all in good fun. But I really think that for a newspaper to publish something like this and not make it more clear, they're sort of undermining their entire reason for being.
Well, especially right now, given some of the trend of the news stories of late and what is going on in the world today,
Yeah.
it is not very responsible at all. Um,
But then,
you
I
know,
can be as outraged as I like. But apparently, according to when the Independent, a newspaper from the UK, called up this organization in Scotland, they were like, "Yeah, one or two people have called in asking about this." So it really didn't
wow.
make it didn't make too many waves apparently in Lanarkshire.
Well, that's good. That's good, I guess. No
People have
harm.
long ago learned to ignore the Motherwell Times, I suppose.
um, and in terms of the more serious news, as everybody has probably seen, there has been somebody that was diagnosed with Ebola in Dallas, and there's been a lot of bit of talk about how this was handled, how it is contained, and so everybody's on high alert. In fact, like a passenger on an airplane flying into Newark this past weekend, basically the flight was sort of put aside, and not the people were not allowed to disembark until the CDC got there, because there was a man and his daughter that had recently come from Liberia. And so this is all over the news right now, which I guess is fitting given what we are going to be talking about today. I will tell you, in terms of Ebola, I'm personally not that worried, or as worried as perhaps maybe I should be, but it's not in New York yet, I guess. So
But I did
I'm
hear completely anecdotally that it's in DC.
yes, I did hear that too. But I mean, in terms of the types of things that I think people need to worry about, like, and this is exactly what all the CDC zombie preparedness, what we talked about last week, with um, Kansas having people have zombie preparedness kits because they're less scary than preparing for tornadoes and that kind of thing. This is really what they have in mind. Getting the sort of public alert out. And like it just makes you think in terms of, especially watching how Dallas handled this. So the person who was diagnosed went to the hospital, told them he had come from Liberia. He had all the symptoms, and they sent him home. And so I think over 100 people have been exposed, although only 40 of those had what they consider to be dangerous contact or close contact. And those are the people that are currently quarantined and being monitored. So anyway, it makes you think, and in terms of the kinds of things that Guillermo del Toro is thinking about. And is it Mr. Hogan as well, who helped him co-write Chuck Hogan, the strain? I think that's a nice segue into our review today.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read that Del Toro basically recruited Hogan to help him with more of the procedural elements of this. And I mean, there's a lot of forensics, and you can see that they've done a lot of research in looking at this. And I think that was what they brought to it. Del Toro had like the overarching storyline, and he got Hogan for some more of the detail work. Is how
Well,
that.
right. I mean, because originally he had presented this as a series or as a plot line. This wasn't originally supposed to be a novel, and then it got rejected. So he was like, okay, maybe I'll make this into a series or into a book series. But he wanted some help with that, so he got Chuck Hogan on board. Um, so why don't we talk a little bit about that piece of it? I have now read at least the first book in the series. There are three. I have read that now twice. I just reread it this past week. Stuart, had you read it before or no?
I've read the whole series, although I will admit that my memory is pretty foggy
Okay.
of everything in the beginning. I remember really enjoying the series. In rereading it, I don't know, maybe not so much. I've read all three books, and then I started to reread the first book, but kind of just got mired.
And Kyle, you have not read the books, correct?
Yeah, my job here today, I suppose, is to be cheerfully ignorant of the subject matter.
Well, I read them when they first came out, and so this was the first time I had actually reread the first book. And I'll agree with you, Stuart. The first time they were kind of, I don't go to the beach, but they were what I would consider beach book reading or summer reading. Um, and I'm pretty sure I enjoyed it more the first time I read it, but I actually enjoyed watching the first two episodes of the series more after I reread it. And it's interesting, just sort of, I don't know if either of you have read any of the interviews with Guillermo del Toro, but just the fact that this got dinged as a show. So he wrote the books, and then immediately after the first book started to get, higher up on the New York Times bestseller list and whatever, they suddenly people are all hammering him to come back and make this into a series, which is just, it's kind of funny how that kind of thing works.
It doesn't surprise me too much, I guess. I guess
No.
I would think that that's probably what he had in mind anyway, on some level.
Well, I think it is, and to me, that's actually how the books read, is like sort of an elaborate movie or show script.
Mhm.
Did you get that sense too, Stuart?
Not really. At least not after having watched the show. I guess when reading the books the first time, you read something by Guillermo del Toro, you're like, of course, this is going to be a audiovisual
Right.
experience at some point. But now, reading the book, having seen the show, I'm like, how did he ever expect to get all of this inner monologue into a TV show? Because there's so much good, rich detail and material that isn't said out loud, and that you wouldn't want to do with a voiceover or something, that it just kind of gets lost. And this is, I guess, maybe I'm going too early into the TV show reaction, but this is a lot of this just doesn't make it onto the screen.
I don't know that all of it needs to either. So, and they take some liberties with the television show, I think, to make up for some of that. I think some of the character development in the book, the reason why to me it reads like more of a script is because he doesn't, even though he has some of this inner monologue and some of this background, he doesn't go incredibly deep into character development. It's all very, I don't know. It's a little, to me, it's a little sparse, but it seems as if they tried to flesh that out a little bit in the show itself. So, and then in terms of getting this on screen, one of the people that is very involved in this and is, you know, he like apparently Guillermo del Toro, he's very involved in the television show in terms of okaying things and whatever, but he's left a lot of it to Carlton Cuse, who I think most people know from Lost.
It's kind of
And
like the forgotten lost guy,
he
because everyone
is
remembers Ames, or not Ames,
Lindelof.
Abrams and Lindelof, but
Yeah.
I kind of forgot that Hughes was involved in that.
Yeah, and then he's also a showrunner for Bates Motel. I don't know if either of you have watched that show.
Not at all.
I have
Um,
not seen
it's
Bates Motel.
actually not that bad. So,
I remember being vaguely surprised not that long ago that it wasn't canceled, and I was like, it must have been better than I expected because it's still on on the air.
I
So,
haven't really followed it. I've catch, when I'm at the gym, sometimes I catch a few episodes, and it's pretty good. But it's kind of in the way that you kind of know where the story's going.
mhm.
If you're into that and you can deal with that, I think it's worth watching. It is beautiful. So the way that it is shot. So I would say if you're up for it, go for it. But in any case, so he is relying pretty heavily on Carlton to kind of compact the story a little bit and to, you know, I think make it into a, I don't want to say palatable, but a more cohesive show, because there, as Stuart said, there is an awful lot to cover. Just even in the, I mean, the first book is almost 700 pages. So, but the first series covers what is in the first book, and the plan is for the second series to cover the second book, and then the third book is supposed to be, I think, possibly broken out into two different seasons.
Hmm.
But the whole idea all along has been that this is a compact, close-ended series. Like, he didn't want it going on forever and ever. So he
I
wanted it.
think that that's actually kind of a refreshing. I mean,
Agreed.
we do see a lot of miniseries right now, but those are much even shorter, like 5 or 6 episodes or 5 or 6 hour long installments. But I think that this will hopefully lead to tighter script writing, just knowing that there's a cutoff at the end.
Kind of avoid Battlestar Galactica syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sort of middle part of it, you mean?
Yeah, that basically, yes, when things kind of start to go off the rails a little bit near the end there, and you're like, wait a minute, you had no idea where you were going
Yeah.
this whole time.
Yeah, and then on to Caprica and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I
So
think the fact that they have a plan is reassuring at least.
agreed. Agreed. And similarly, Lost did something very similar to that too, which is, they definitely did not have a plan because they didn't think that it was actually going to be picked up again. so so I think you definitely see Lost get a bit lost.
I think it's so funny that Lost has become this like cautionary tale of television writing in a way. I listened to a lot to Kumail Nanjiani's X-Files podcast, and he has talked about this too. Um, just in terms of like it's so obvious, it's so clear in hindsight that they had no direction.
Well, right. And then, they created a ton of mysteries that they never closed the loop on and then said, "Oh no, that was intentional." And it's just when you get a good show that you has a plot and you plot out exactly where it's going to go and the story arc makes sense, that is, something that the audience is expecting. I think Fringe ran into this too. I don't know if either of you watched that show.
Fringe, like, yeah, they like reinvented that show every season, I feel
Yeah.
like.
So, and I love that show and I love a lot of the things about that show, but I also found it frustrating because, every time they ran into some sort of insurmountable storyline, they basically created another universe, like, to basically uh, close that down and be like, okay, but it's not like that now because now we're in another universe. So, um, yeah, but I still like the show. You just want to kind of see it be coherent and come to a reasonable end. So,
And so
um,
to that end, let's talk about, well, not the writers of the show, but those appearing in it.
yes.
And we don't see every character in the first two episodes, but we meet most of the core in the first two. And so playing the most important, the major roles. And there were some really cool casting decisions made here. Even though when you look at the some of the behind the scenes, apparently it was a little less clear cut who was going to be who.
Right.
Corey Stoll is the lead, male lead, I guess. Dr. Ephraim Goodweather, which is kind of one of those names, TV
Yeah.
names, and he's to me most recognizable as the dude from House of Cards,
Peter Russo.
Peter Russo. He's played other roles. I see him now, when I go back and look at other stuff. That I was like, oh, that was okay. There he was. Look at him. He was in the Situation Room or something, looking very serious.
Right. But he has hair in this, so
He
you
has
might
very
not recognize him.
disappointing wig. Yeah,
Quote unquote hair, yeah.
It is its own character, I kind of think, in this show.
yeah, exactly. David Bradley, the cantankerous English actor who's famous for being like the caretaker at Hogwarts in the Harry Potter movies, and the unintelligible. Wait, is he a cop or is he the
Yeah.
unintelligible farmer in Hot
He's the
Fuzz?
farmer,
He's
He's the
the
farmer.
farmer that they translate.
Yeah,
and
And then
he's got the bomb in his barn.
yeah. The
right.
the, yeah, marine mine.
Yeah.
And the caretaker's Filch, by the way, Stuart, for you not up on your Harry Potter
Never
trivia.
read the books.
Jeez. What?
Yep, I'm proud of it.
You shouldn't be.
Uh, and then I don't know that I've ever seen Mia Maestro before, but I think she's doing a good job as Dr. Nora Martinez.
She was in Alias. I don't know if you watched that at all. She was Nadia. And she's in like a ton of she's in a ton of episodes of shows you would that's why she looks vaguely recognizable, I think. But
Yeah, I don't think I ever seen her.
mm,
And then Kevin Durand is Vasily Fett, who we don't
yeah.
meet until episode 2, but this dude should be recognizable. I mean, he's been in 100, not 100 movies, which is funny because it feels like I see him in everything.
Hmm.
But
He's been in a lot of shows.
yeah,
Definitely was in Lost.
he was in Lost, and I guess that's how he kind of ended up in this show.
I recognize him. I don't know if either of you watched Dead Like Me, but he plays a very memorable character called Chuck in Dead Like Me, who gets his like soul ripped out and starts like a cult. because
I
he
think
thinks he's seen the angel of death. Like it's a pretty he is really amazing in that particular episode.
I
So
had never watched all of that show, but I did enjoy it. The like 2 seasons or so that I saw of it.
I have not seen this show, but I did recognize him from 310 to Yuma, actually.
That and he was X-Men Origins.
Mhm.
Freaking, he's been in a lot of like action movies. That's kind of his typecast is an enforcer type guy, which is kind of what he's playing as Fett, although he's a little more nuanced and has more lines in this show
mhm.
for sure.
And then we have Jonathan Hyde, who I mean he's in so much. Pretty well known British character actor.
My
Um,
mind was blown when I realized that he's the hunter
in Jumanji,
slash father from Jumanji. I was like, whoa.
yeah. And he looks pretty awesome in this, and he plays this role really well, I think.
I guess that role was originally supposed to be played by John Hurt, which now I'm a little bit sad that we didn't
That would have
get
been
to see
nice.
John Hurt in this role, but I think it's probably because John Hurt went to go do Doctor Who instead, which is also fine.
I was about to say he was too busy playing the War Doctor.
Yeah.
Wait, John Hurt was set up for. I thought John Hurt was Abraham Satrakian
Oh, maybe we
in the
got
original
confused.
version of
Oh,
the
maybe I
pilot.
am too.
Who
Yeah.
was for which role?
Still, I'm sad that John Hurt wasn't in this in the beginning at all. He's awesome.
Also, Roy Dotrice had, Del Toro was trying to get Roy Dotrice to play Satrakian, and that name probably means nothing to anybody. He's a stage actor from England, but he did the audiobook version of Song of Fire and Ice or Ice and Fire or whatever, George R. R. Martin's book. He read every character, so he's got a lot of range, at least in his voice. So I'm very familiar with his voice. I would have been
I'm
kind
o-
of
Also, a lot of time.
I'm okay with David Bradley though as Satrakian.
Oh yeah, I'm super happy with him. He sometimes is a little bit unintelligible.
Well, that's all right.
He's got some of that grapple voice going on. But yeah, so after Jonathan Hyde, who is Eldridge Palmer, Richard Sammel, and this
Yeah.
guy is doing great work.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I
He
feel
is-
bad for any German actor who has to play a Nazi at this point. It's just
I know.
must be such old hat. And he's not just a Nazi; he's like the worst vampire Nazi you've ever met.
Yep. Yeah, so he's like the servant of the master. And then, in terms of other well-known actors, Sean Astin is a pretty main character here. He plays Jim Kent.
Arguably,
He-
like the best known actor in this show.
Yep. You might know him as the Fat Hobbitses, Samwell.
Or
Samwise, rather.
the lead in
Samwise.
Toy Soldiers. Not Toy
Right?
Soldiers. What was that?
Goonies. Goonies.
He was in Goonies.
It was Toy Soldiers.
It was Toy Soldiers. It's a great film.
So yeah.
Can't believe you guys are discounting the 1992 classic Encino Man.
Oh my gosh, I would never discount that. He's incredible in that.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah.
He digs up a caveman in his backyard and
Right.
defrosts him and takes him to high school.
Hmm. Wasn't that like Brendan Fraser's
Yeah.
first film?
No, it was one of his breakout roles, though, for sure.
One of his breakout roles. So,
It's Fraser, I believe. Pronounced
Sorry.
Fraser. Don't want him to show up at your house and
sorry.
beat you up. I hear he does
Wait,
that.
wait, and Paulie Shore as well. Don't forget his appearance in that. Sorry,
The Weasel.
the Weasel. And then Gabriel Bolivar, which is the rock star who's sort of this goth rock star in this series, is played by Jack Kesey, who really hasn't done much, but there's been a few articles that he's the next Ryan Gosling, whatever that may mean. I think he looks horrendous in this, so I'm curious to see if that actually occurs. But
How could you be the next Ryan Gosling when Ryan Gosling is still on top
Ryan
as Ryan Gosling?
right. I will also say his wig magic or hairpiece magic is interesting here. I think his wig, along with Corey Stoll's wig, should get together and have a party.
At least I didn't have any pretense here that was actually his real hair.
True.
Like you see him very, very early with no wig on.
That's true, but still.
That might actually just be another wig underneath the first wig, Kyle.
It's really short. Why would you wear a wig of a buzz cut?
Well, by the end of that first episode, there's definitely some suspect hair stuff going on.
Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
But yeah, so he's fine, I guess. Bolivar is kind of a major character, but weirdly doesn't really get. He's not that in so much in the first part of the story. I mean, he does make appearances in the episodes, but yeah.
Yeah, you get the sense that he's bad and he's, a
Oh
rock
wow.
star, but that's
Yeah.
it.
Natalie Brown who put the parentheses in the show notes for Dawn of
I
the Dead?
did.
I was like, where did you find this obscure ass reference
Where I
to Natalie
find
Brown?
all my obscure references.
So Natalie Brown, who plays Kelly Goodweather, Ephraim's estranged wife, apparently had a small role as a CDC reporter, Dawn of the Dead,
Right?
2004. Now, which was she? Which one was she exactly?
If you go and look at the footage, you'll recognize her, but she's one of the ones. And I think a lot of the footage with her was actually cut out, so you can see it in the extended cut. But
I
she's the
yeah,
one basically
honestly,
talking about the dead taking over and all that kind of thing.
okay. Like she's an anchor on a TV
Yeah.
set. Okay, not
Hmm.
one of the ones doing stand-ups surrounded by zombies in the streets.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think so. Anyway, I don't quote me on that. I'll have to go back and look. But I did recognize her. Actually, this is how nerdy I am. I recognized her from Dawn of the Dead immediately when I saw her.
Wow.
There's something wrong with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
The
Um,
only person I recognize from those outtakes in the Dawn of the Dead, like the part of the special features that came on the DVD of that, was the guy who played the Doctor on Babylon 5
yeah.
is an anchor who does a lot of monologues for the special special features. I forget the name of the actor, the name of his character on Babylon 5. I was like, oh, that's the Doctor. Anyway, they had some decent acting chops for their throwaway outtakes for that movie. To be proven again here by Natalie Brown, who does a nice job first as a sympathetic character, and then well later on we'll get to how she ends up.
And then to round out the list, we've got Miguel Gomez as Augustine. He hasn't been in a ton, although I don't know if any of you saw the Domino Effect, which is an interesting apocalypse story of its own, but really more about the financial meltdown and what happens if the economy stops.
I was thinking of that Keira Knightley movie, but that's just Domino.
That
It's
is
like,
just Domino. Yeah.
I was also thinking of the Keira Knightley movie.
No, and then we've got Ben Highland, who's a child actor, and he plays Zach Goodweather. And he's actually been in more stuff than you would expect. But
not bad, honestly, for a kid.
no, no, not at all. And then there's some recurring roles. I just want to point out the actor that plays Gus's brother, Crispin, is Francis Capra, who
Boy, Francis Capra not looking good in
not
this
looking very
series.
good.
I knew we'd have
He
to talk about this because there's the connection with Veronica Mars, right?
Yeah,
right.
Veronica Mars.
So
He looked like his normal self in the Veronica Mars movie that came out not that long ago. So I think
I
maybe
was,
he put on some weight for this role in particular,
I
or
don't know.
he's supposed to be a junkie, so it kind of
Yeah,
makes a little bit of
also a
sense.
bad wig, I
Expressed.
think. So
Yeah.
he looks pretty rough in this, but I was still happy to see him getting some work.
Mhm.
So and then I don't know if either of you want to talk about any of the other folks that are
Well,
thrown
where's
in here.
Fitzwilliam? He's not even on here.
He's not. What do you mean?
The guy who plays Fitzwilliam, Eldridge Palmer's buddy.
The no, he's on here. He's in recurring. Roger Cross.
Roger, he's really recognizable. Like he's
Yeah,
been in
he's in a
He's from
lot of stuff.
24.
24
24.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also been in I think he was in Underworld possibly. And he was also in I don't know, he's in Continuum as one of the main terrorist type time traveling companions named Travis. So yeah, if you see him, you've seen him. I mean, he is makes appearances all over the place and he's huge.
Hmm.
He's a big person.
Yes, he's like
Oh, I see.
giant. If you see him with some of the main characters in Continuum, he's like 3 feet taller than all of them.
Oh wow.
Maybe they're just tiny. I don't know, but
I mean,
I
in
feel
this
like
show, he looks much bigger than Jonathan Hyde, but that's just because Jonathan Hyde is like old and bent over and stuff.
that
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I feel like he always plays sympathetic kind of character, even though in Continuum he's a bad guy. In this, he's kind of not on the right side of stuff, but he has I don't know what it is, like a kind face maybe or something that or his voice. It's
he's he's got a pretty good voice.
yeah. So anyway, that's like and as you can tell, it's a big cast list, and that's not even everybody. The recurring cast list is as long again as the main guys, and we haven't even got to the computer hacker and some other people who end up joining the posse after the first few episodes. So it's I feel like this is kind of the first sign of why this is another sign rather of why this is a difficult TV show to do. I mean, Game of Thrones also has a ridiculous size cast, but they're telling their stories an hour at a time. I don't know. Like, do you guys have any reactions to trying to fit this many people on screen for 45 minutes?
I mean, I think it's a big cast. I'd agree with you, but just sort of, and just seeing how the first couple of episodes have been put together, I do think that that is some of the challenge of this because you definitely have to keep all of these people straight. And I think that sometimes they're throwing people in there that, and this isn't even all of them, they're throwing people in there that I'm kind of like, okay, why'd they do that? But I don't know what your point of view is.
I guess my view on how they're introducing people kind of ties into my view on the show in general. Um, which is like it's just it's good enough and creepy enough that I want to watch more, but also bafflingly bad in some ways,
Yes.
especially on the writing side. And so like sometimes they'll introduce somebody and they'll just be like this giant just glob of exposition that they'll just kind of throw out there. And sometimes they'll introduce somebody and then cut away from them, and I'll be like, "Who the hell was that dude? And
Why do we
did we
care?
just? Why do we care?" Like it's so it's weird. It's weird because like I feel like it's indicative of the pace of the show is kind of like everything's going really fast, everything's going really slow, everything's going really fast, everything's going really slow, and like that happens with the character introductions too.
Well, and I'm wondering because I have to totally admit that after the first couple of episodes, I stopped watching it, and Stuart has told me that I should finish watching it. So I think I probably will. But I'm wondering, and maybe you can add some insight on this, Stuart. I'm wondering if with a show like this, where you're trying to introduce so many characters, maybe they're trying to get that over with in the first couple of episodes, but it's a little too much, in my opinion, which is part of why I stopped watching it. Um, but sometimes I feel like, and I felt like that a little bit with Game of Thrones too, in the first couple of episodes, but obviously continued watching. That maybe they were trying to throw everything in, kind of get it started and yank people in, and then it would have a more normal pace through the rest of the series. What do you think, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's difficult to keep track if you consider that you have a lot of people haven't read these books. And
Right.
and with Game of Thrones, I don't know what the ratio of the audience is of people who've read them to people who haven't. I think somehow that show manages to hold both sets of people's attention, at least based on my small focus group of people who watch it at my house.
How
Um,
many is that? It's like four.
like five.
Five.
And admittedly, some of those people wouldn't be there if their partners hadn't dragged them along who had read the book. So it's maybe not a perfectly objective focus group. Um, Either way, I don't think that the number of cast members is the only problem that this first episode has, and it's also like a double episode. It's a 70 minute,
Hmm.
Mm,
or like I don't know, 2/3.
1.5 or
Yeah,
something, yeah.
um, and it's a super long, and it feels long, doesn't it?
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, oh, why is this not over yet? Why is there like ending after ending after ending to this episode?
Yeah, it kind of felt like there were at least five separate places that they could have stopped and just gone on into the next one. But, and that's what I mean. It's almost like throwing in everything but the kitchen sink. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what Kyle was just saying about the writing, because it does feel there is a camp element to this that feels very deliberate to me, and it's almost a little sci-fi channel or sci-fi, as you know I like to call it.
Is Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's clunky. Like it's bad sometimes. Like and I don't really mind all the mystical stuff being bad. Like creepy old dudes who make deals with Nazis are gonna talk in creepy ways. Like that's fine. They're not gonna sound like normal people. It's more like
clearly they are not. I
yeah,
mean, that's just
exactly.
a given.
It's more like just the way that the CDC folks interact with each other, especially like the street guys like Gus and his older brother and like stuff like that. Like
It's a little
it's
overdone.
just a real clunky. Like it is really overwritten too, which I think is weird. Like they always go in the direction of too much being said rather than too little. Like I'm thinking of the scene early in the first episode where Francis Capra tries to rob
Oh yeah.
the kind of junk store or thrift store
Oh
The
yeah.
of
pawnbroker. Yeah.
of Satrakian,
Citrakian.
and like he kind of reaches in and he goes to grab some money, and Satrakian holds this knife, and then he gives this like 45-second monologue where he's like, "I've
Yes.
got this against the carotid artery, and you've hit the floor before like the ambulance dials." And I was like, this scene would have been so much more effective if he just held a knife right to his wrist and just kind of like stared him straight down in the face, and then the other guy obviously knows what he has to do to get out of the situation. It's not a surprise. Like I don't know. It's just that's just the one example of how like they always seem to want to go for like twice as many words as are actually
Right. And
necessary.
it to me it was just like trying way too hard to show what a badass he was.
Hmm.
And you don't need to do it. I have a problem with shows that treat the audience like they're dumb.
Hmm.
And this felt like that to me, like almost adding too much into it. I felt similarly about the scenes where they're describing what's happening with the virus, because eventually we will figure this stuff out. I don't know that you needed to cram all that in to the first couple of episodes, and I felt like they did that an awful lot. What did you think, Stuart?
As far as writing goes, I had a couple of instances I wanted to just quickly mention. At the very beginning of the episode, or very early on, when the plane is sitting on the apron and people are freaking out, and kind of very weirdly, two guys from air traffic control tower decide to go outside and look at the
Right.
airplane, which I think is kind of unlikely. And it doesn't
Like
happen.
touch it or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in the book, there's like a chapter almost dedicated to how this plane looks and how the
Hmm.
guy in the ground controls tower is like, it looks kind of like a dead animal and it's like a beached whale and all this stuff. And it's quite poetic and it's lengthy and it's quite effective, I think. Maybe a little bit self-indulgent, but then so you get the guy who's playing Bishop. He goes out and touches the airplane. He's like, it's like a dead animal,
Hmm.
and then it just sits out there. And you're like, okay, yeah, yeah, you have to get that line in there, but you just kind of let it sit there like a turd. That was one instance where they were just trying to get something from the book into the show that I don't think really worked that well, and it was weird that he delivered it and that he had to walk all the way out to the airplane to do that. And
There,
then
there. Did you also notice the other piece where they tried to cram in the detail that Ephraim Goodweather drinks milk?
I did a
They
word
mentioned
search in
they
the Kindle
mentioned it
book for milk, and it doesn't come up until page 108.
right, and they mentioned it at least 3 times in the like. It's ridiculous. So that was the piece that just kept like, why are you
That's
even saying this?
that's a symptom of a whole other problem with this first episode. The other writing thing I wanted to discuss quickly, which makes us, and it's actually kind of goes back to that of making Ephraim Goodweather a total asshole, is his first kind of, not his first dialogue, but like very early on when he goes to that custody hearing and he just keeps talking and talking over people and saying what everybody else is thinking about him. Like, yes, because I'm controlling. Yes, because I love my work. Yes, because I love my wife. And yeah, it's more of this like, okay, yeah, you're doing a great job of making everybody, including the audience, think you're an asshole. Uh,
and and again, also just like a huge instance of the writers like telling and not showing. Like there's two scenes really early. The one with because there's one where he's talking to like a psychiatrist or a counselor, right? And then
Hmm.
another where he's like at a custody hearing where it's just like kind of just vomits up like exposition about himself. Like, yes, I'm and I'm this kind of person, but I'm also a good dad, and I care about you, and I care
yeah,
about my
yeah.
son,
The
and all
AA
this kind of
meeting,
stuff.
I think, is the other thing you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yes, yes. That's what I'm thinking of. The AA meeting, where it's just kind of like, okay, like it would be nice if we actually saw this, because what I see is, yeah, again, like kind of an asshole who's like honestly a little bit out of control. Like when he grabs the his boss like by the shirt front and like hauls him off his feet. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of seems like somebody who should probably be taken off the job.
Well, and
Um,
also should not be given custody of his kid.
yeah.
Like you don't feel, and I feel like in the book you get a more sympathetic view of him, and I don't know why they went this way with
Like
his character.
I can feel Corey Stoll kind of doing his damnedest. He's trying really hard to kind of make him a compelling character, and I think he's doing good work. Actually, I think all the actors across the board are doing really good work, but it's just this the stuff they've been given is really rough.
Right. I think there's only so much you can do to overcome some of this writing.
Yeah, but he really does sound like an asshole.
He does.
And there aren't very many likable characters, because when it comes right down to this storyline, at least in the first few episodes that we're talking about, like the problem, there's like basically a vampire invasion of New York, is made possible and exacerbated by like negative human traits of greed and apathy, and desire for power, and like
Hmm.
they make, this is how, I mean, this is actually an interesting writing element, that the only way that this could have happened was through the worst possible traits of people. But then they kind of, there's like an almost a complete absence of good people,
Hmm.
because even F
Well,
is a dick, but most of the other people that he's with, it turns out, are people who care about the truth, and it's those people who are gonna like save the world, but everybody else is a dick.
well, right. And in case you forgot that, there's that whole scene between him and Captain Redfern.
Right, and they actually basically say that out loud.
Hmm.
Redfern's like, I just want to know what's the truth. Yeah, but he's also
Hey,
an airline pilot drinking whiskey in a bar in the middle of the day, in his
Hmm.
uniform.
looking real bad.
Hmm.
Like I cannot believe they released those people out into the road with like their
Right.
bleeding eyeballs.
Well, yeah.
Well, speaking of which, I have like a plot question that I'm just wondering if I was too dumb to figure out, and so I thought I'd ask you guys because you'd read the book. So like, there's four survivors, right? There's
Hmm.
the lawyer, the pilot, there's some other guy who doesn't do much as far as I can tell, and then the rock star.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And like it's very important to the the Jonathan Hyde character Palmer that they get out into the world. I assume because the master wants to like spread these worms among the population. So like, Corey Stoll, if he wants to keep them, uh, under quarantine, but then the other people kind of like work their bureaucratic magic and get the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who I'm pretty sure does not have jurisdiction, but whatever, to come down there and let them out. Um, but like, why did they need to do that if those 206 other bodies are gonna reanimate and just wander out of the coroner's office?
This is a problem, and
Yes.
Like,
this is a problem in the book and the TV show,
Yep.
and it
okay.
it goes back even further to how does the, spoiler alert, I guess we should have put that up in the front. How does the master do what he does in the 6 minutes or whatever from when the plane lands until they notice that it's shut down on the apron?
Hmm.
There's no explanation even inside the canon of the of this fictional, this story. He's not, I mean, he's fast, he's superhumanly strong, but how the hell do you exsanguinate 210 people in 6 minutes?
Well,
Well, but also
also,
like instantly because none of them looked scared or they weren't
Nobody
running
gets out of
away.
their chair. Yeah, there's
mhm.
no panic. It doesn't
and
make
also,
sense.
and also, if he's all that powerful, why does he even need to do that on the plane? If his coffin's there, just
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
into
Like
shipping and let him like
why
set
didn't they
him loose on
just
the city.
why didn't
So,
they like ship it just normally, and everyone would just be like, "Oh, that's weird, a giant box, like whatever." And then when it gets to JFK, like just drive it over to Manhattan, like, and then have him come out of the coffin and exsanguinate some people. Like, why even, like have arouse the suspicion of everyone by doing this thing on the plane?
right, because I mean, if you did the other way, there's no chance of containing it at all. It'd take much longer.
Yeah.
So maybe, I mean, so yes, it is a huge problem in the books.
Okay, so it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Now, also, what does not make any sense is why every single other person is like in these huge decontamination suits, and then the coroner is just wandering around.
I know.
Like, first thing he does is take off his face mask. Second thing he does is take off his gloves.
Yeah,
I was like, you're not long for
No.
this world.
this was
You're,
also a problem. Yes.
Yes. And also, I mean, but on the flip side of that, I thought some of the effects were actually pretty good in on the good side of things. They got into a lot of trouble because of the worm effect, and I don't did you both
Yeah,
know
it was
about this?
a billboard with that
Yeah.
giant eyeball, I guess, on
It
it.
was
Yeah.
also it was also here in New York. It was on a ton of like the sides of buses and whatever. And I actually was walking by one of these buses, and this woman got like really freaked out looking at this, and she was walking down the street with her child. She's like, I can't believe that's on a bus,
It's kind
and
of
I was
understandable.
kind
It's
of
really
like,
messed up.
I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I guess I could see that. And then I saw the whole thing where they had been asked to either change or pull those ads, and then suddenly they all were disappearing. Although I still have seen a few hanging out here and there because, it's New York and you can never get rid of all of them.
Hmm.
So,
That
um,
visual does eventually show up too.
yeah,
You got
the
that.
visual shows up. So I thought some of the effects were actually pretty good,
Mhm.
considering that it's an FX show.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall the show looks pretty good. It looks like I mean, it looks like Del Toro directed it. Like
It does.
it's beautiful in a way that's not necessarily logical. Like,
Hmm.
like the when the master's kind of on the ground and that airport employee is just kind of wandering around tapping his head and looking confused, and then gets his whole you know blood drained and head squished.
Mm.
Like, I was like, why would you walk up to that obviously super creepy thing with like a spine, lying on the ground? But
I
it
don't think
was
anybody would do that.
but it looked really good. Like, it just looked, you know, terrifying and creepy and beautiful, like just all kind of spread out like that. I don't know. The show looks very good. And in general, I think most of the time that they shoot for horror, they like hit the mark, and it actually is like horrifying, which is good.
Yeah, it's. I feel like we've kind of thrown some scales off of the eyes by pointing out though that it doesn't really just have to go down this way. The airport doesn't really have to be a part of the set in this story to get the box to Manhattan, which is the goal of episode one.
Hmm.
But it's more dramatic this way, and it gets the CDC involved, and that way now we've got this forensic story that kind of takes over. Certainly, the book is well heavy, really heavy on
Hmm.
forensic jargon and like disaster response etiquette and procedure protocol and shit like that.
It
I,
also
I
has
guess
also has a lot of details about rats, and I will recommend to both of you that you read the book, that they reference an awful lot, or they reference details from it, especially with the Vasily character,
mhm.
um, called Rats, and it is really a fascinating book. Although a little, if you don't like rats, it's a little bit cringeworthy. So.
Stuart, I'm going to break in just a second before we kind of leave this particular plot hole. I just want to say one more thing, which is that I think it is also like a little bit of a missed opportunity in that the show seems to want to make everyone either, totally badass, or like a 100% in control, like evil mastermind whose plans like cannot go wrong, and everything is like totally planned out, which is kind of how they uh, show Eichhorst and Palmer to be.
Hmm.
Like, I could easily see it being that, these people can't really control the master, and he does things that don't make any sense because he's a vampire who's like 900 years old, and he does whatever he wants to and doesn't care about, what happens. So, if they'd have showed a scene where Icor's was like, "Oh God, why is this guy doing this, man? It was just gonna be so easy, and now I've got to figure out a secondary plan for getting him, out of this quarantine zone or whatever." But they don't want to let the kind of the mythology of the totally in control, everything is going according to plan bad guy go. They're not willing to do that, so they're just left with it making no sense, even though it could easily just be explained by the fact that this guy is, you know doesn't really understand where he is or why he's woken up from his coffin or anything like that.
It's unfortunate that they don't want to show us at all how the sausage is made, and instead we have to see like everything working out perfectly. Because I would really like to have seen the negotiation process between Palmer and Eichhorst as the proxy for the master. Like, okay, so if I bring you to New York and then get you across the bridge, and then okay, eternal life,
Hmm.
right? Or
Yeah.
like how does that process, the quid pro quo, go there, like across the table? Um, because I assume that would have been kind of an interesting thing to be a fly on the wall for. Is like, so I'm going to bring about the end of the world. What's in it for me? That
Yeah,
kind of
they're like
conversation.
not interested in showing, these people as like real people. They're just interested in showing them as creepy villains. And
Yeah,
so like we don't get to see like, their awkward interactions or whatever, or the how he convinces Palmer that he is indeed a vampire or anything like that.
yeah, yeah. Because Palmer's definitely like 100% in the know, and it's interesting. Yeah, you're curious to know how he is
How
so
that
confident in Eichhorst. not having
Yeah.
met the master, obviously, because he meets him at the end of episode 2.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and also, why is Icor's different from any of these other things?
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have
You
the
know?
same red eyes or the same lust for blood or anything like that.
uh, you see him in makeup, as it were, in a subsequent episode,
Hmm.
which is it kind of answers some of those questions.
Okay.
One other thing we need to talk about before we leave episode 1 is Satrakian shows up there after seeing right after he's held Weevil for his knife or whatever, or for getting the cash back. He sees one 20-second clip of the news about an airplane shuts down on the tarmac that came from Berlin. And based on those like two pieces of information, he's like, the master is back, and he goes to the airport and he confronts the CDC and presents them with all these facts or things that he shouldn't know, that they barely know, about how the corpses aren't breaking down or aren't decomposing, and how there's a big box there. And they kind of are taken aback, but this is another example of Ephraim just being like a irrational dick. Is like, you're a crazy person, just get out of here. And they just ignore the fact that this guy knows way too much. And so it's, I guess it's one of those things for the story. You have to be like, oh, but look, he knows, and you have to listen to him. And I guess they can't listen to him this early, or the story would be over, and it'll be a one episode non-event show.
Well, and I thought, I mean, in the differences between, the novel and the show, part of how they handled it in the book is that they were thinking that somebody had leaked the information
Hmm.
and started these rumors, and so they didn't. He was kind of raving like a crazy person,
Yeah.
but what they thought was that somebody inside the organization or was trying to leak this to start a panic in the public, so they were trying to shut him down. So that actually made a lot more sense, but they didn't show that in the show at all.
I do have to say that Satrakian doesn't do himself any favors here. Like, it's a 40-minute cab ride or a 2-minute subway ride out to JFK from Manhattan. So you'd think that in that time he'd sit down and say, okay, like how can I not come across as a crazy person when I go to talk to these people? And he could have said, I was a doctor in the Congo wilderness and I saw exactly these symptoms or something, like something that would, make immediately get the attention of the CDC, even if it couldn't be, verified on closer scrutiny. But instead, he's just like, "Don't take the coffin out of the airport!" Like it's just like,
And
of
he's
course,
just
no one's gonna listen to you.
and he's just yelling at them too. He
Yeah,
doesn't sound sane, so I
Well,
don't.
he's getting the he knows he's getting blown off right away.
yeah,
Right.
He does make a mistake though by referring to the virus as he.
Yes.
So and then Ephraim's like, I'm sorry, no, no, this isn't
yeah.
gonna work. So I don't know. Episode 1 ends, as we've already mentioned, with 6 endings. Um, any one of which could have been probably the right one. You've got the medical examiner getting mobbed, which I honestly thought was the end. But then
I
there are
did too.
4 more endings. You've also got Gus driving across the bridge.
Hmm.
Or does he even drop the? No, he doesn't drop the thing off till episode 2.
No, you
Uh,
just see the ominous driving across the bridge
you've got
to
the
make the point.
Emily or Emma coming home, which is a good ending. That's a good one.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Uh, and you've got
The
F looking at a box of worms, saying, "This is new."
the coroner getting mobbed is it was a great scene. Like
Yes,
that
and
is
they
exactly the kind of thing that the show does really, really well.
it was a great scene, and again, I was convinced that that was the ending, and then I was like, "What? There's more." And they used the dulcet tones of Neil Diamond to their advantage there to make it
Mm-hmm.
even more creepy.
Hmm.
So yeah, but that to me seemed like it should have been the ending, but I guess not.
Yeah, and then you also have a scene with Palmer saying, "I have everything I need for the first time in my life,"
Hmm.
being all weird and mustache twirly.
Hmm.
And you also have Satrakian doing voiceovers about love and how it's the most dangerous human passion.
Even
It's just
even even though we've seen an awful lot of non-love in this
non-love
Yeah.
going on.
episode.
Yeah. So that episode, and you and I, HA, both remarked on this when we first saw it. We were like, "Wow, that was not awesome." And I think we had the hype machine was definitely dialed to 11 for us, so we probably suffered from that. But this episode does have some legitimate shortcomings. that I think were in the book when you really look at it. Like some of these holes are just there from the
Hmm.
get go, and it doesn't. And the TV show doesn't have all of this flowery exposition and description to back up the problem or to maybe like diffuse the problem of some of the plot issues that the TV show just has to kind of like plow ahead with.
No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, after rereading the book and going back and watching this, and maybe because I was a little bit further away from the hype machine, I was able to sort of enjoy it a little bit more. Although I was still feeling the same thing that Kyle was mentioning in terms of the trying to throw so much in there
Hmm.
at once. However, I am inspired to watch more of the series than I was initially, so I think I will give it more of a chance.
Yeah, I mean, the first episode, again, like I mentioned, is like a mixture of bad and good. Like there was, something basically every few minutes that made me kind of groan and like put my hand in my head. But there's like just enough here, and there's just enough that's compelling and creepy and fun that it made me definitely want to watch more. Even though, again, there were all kinds of things about it that were didn't quite go right.
Yeah, and we've already talked about a few of the elements of episode two that we did and didn't like. Is there anything else about episode two that you wanted to talk about? Like Fett's character or the character of Fett, anything that he does or any of that kind of stuff?
I will say that so we've already done a bit of comparing this to Game of Thrones, which I guess makes sense because you know, uh, they're both adapting source material that's kind of dense and an ensemble, uh, has an ensemble cast as well. But I think what's weird is that this show doesn't feel to me like a show that is trying to cram 700 pages worth of material into one season. Like it doesn't have the same pace and it doesn't need to or isn't working as hard. So like for example, when Fett is introduced, like he's like in his basement hanging out with his cat, and it was just such a weird scene to me. And I was thinking about like in Game of Thrones when they introduce Oberyn Martell. So he, you meet him at a brothel, and he is choosing a variety of men and women that he's going to basically have sex with. He gets into a fight with two of the Lannisters, the family that he has a personal vendetta against. And would have killed them except that someone shows up and kind of stops him at the last second, and it's maybe like a 5 minute scene, but you learn all kinds of things about him during that scene. You learn that he's charming and suave, but also arrogant, that he's dangerous, but also lets his temper get the best of him, especially when it has to do with his personal vendetta, which drives him and makes, clouds his judgment. Those are all things that are going to play into his arc and especially the termination of his arc over the course of the season. Like in this scene with Kevin Durant, and actually in both of the scenes, like what do we really learn about Vasily Fett? Like he has a cat, he's very tall, um, and he has a weird thing for dead rats and mice. Like
And the
it's really
truth.
I really
He
have.
loves the truth.
He does love the truth. That's true, and he's not afraid to shut down a restaurant over it. But like, especially the first scene where we're in his basement, I'm just like, who the fuck is this guy? He's got a badge of some kind. I can't tell. Sorry, I'm not so sure if I'm supposed to
No,
swear on
we're
this
totally
podcast.
all about it.
Okay, cool. I'm like, I can't tell, who he's supposed to be or what he's supposed to do, but I don't learn much about him except again that he has a cat and he's very tall. And then even in the second scene, which does a little bit of a better job, like I'm still just kind of frustrated by the extent that the show is not giving me we're not kind of learning about the characters like through their actions or in the same way or with the same economy, I guess. And we're left knowing with a lot more questions than I think we really should be, considering how much material is going to have to make it into the season.
That's a good point. Because honestly, like anybody who starts their introduction to a show with a preparation montage,
Hmm.
I mean, from that we learned that he's well prepared and probably a badass. And then we learned that he's incorruptible, or at least not willing to take a $200 bribe to stop doing his
Hmm.
job.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it's more screen time than those two, and maybe there's something I'm not not attributing to that, but we don't learn a lot given the amount of time it takes to tell those two stories.
Hmm.
But I don't know. He continues to be an interesting character as the show goes forward, and as the books, he's kind of like a direct competitor for Ephraim Goodweather as the male lead of the entire story.
Which I think is exciting because I do think Kevin Durant has a lot of magnetism in the role, and like who wouldn't like a guy who just shakes dead rats at people to get them to go where he wants them to.
or show them the urine. Show them the urine lines. And I'd agree with you, Sturt, in the books. I think to me, he's more of an interesting character because he figures out a lot of the things that are going on by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And just by the things that he knows, just generally about his job. And that's a key character. Um, that's a key to his character. And he's just kind of going along on his way and doing his job and is figuring all these things out and figuring out how to handle different problems. Whereas, Goodweather has all of this information and is still kind of, he needs convincing, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Whereas Goodweather is unwilling to make the leap from like viruses to vampires. Fett basically makes right away the leap from rats to vampires, like no problem. He has no, and maybe that's what one of the things that Del Toro is trying to tell us about the difference between those two characters.
mm.
Yeah, but yeah, it's Kevin Durant. I think is a fun guy to watch in this show. Other other stuff that goes on in episode 2. We see Gus and Weevil get some more screen time together.
Yeah, boy, that really kind of brings the narrative to a halt every time Gus comes back. I'm just like, okay.
Yep.
It does feel that way a
But
little bit. Yeah.
I did like Bolivar's scenes, um, and especially with kind of the blood craving that start to show up there, and
Yeah.
the image of him kind of licking the blood off the floor is quite gruesome.
Right. I also think that one of the things that they are doing within the show that within the book is not jarring, but it takes up an awful lot of time in the book, and it's part of why the book is as long as it is. Um, they're trying to tie the characters together a little bit more. So you see Bolivar and the lawyer woman talking, and you see a little bit more of a connection. I mean, and we saw this in the first episode, the connection between Gus and Icorn, or Icorst rather. And so that's a little bit more compact, whereas in the book you're kind of seeing separate stories a lot of the time, for a while anyway.
Some people that are getting introduced right now, we basically don't even see for episodes at a time either. Obviously, in episode 2, I'm pretty sure we don't see the nerdy guy with glasses who woke up in the airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure he's not even noticed. He's not even seen in that episode, but he'll come back later. So it's like that's one of the downsides to having this giant cast is that you lose track of people, and I guess that also happens in Game of Thrones. Man, we just keep coming back to that show.
Boy,
Yeah.
the scene between Ike Horst and Citrakian at the jail, like, is a good example of how sometimes the best scenes are the ones with the least kind of special effects and gore and stuff. Like that scene is incredibly compelling, and it's just because you have these two old, intense dudes like just glaring at each other through this, I thought that scene was amazing. I really, really, really liked that little face off there. And I also really wondered what those two prison guards thought. Because
Listening to the
there's a prison
conversation.
guard standing behind each of them, like, what?
What
And they're only hearing half the conversation because it's through the little telephone. But I'm just like, what sense could you possibly make of this insane sounding conversation that they're having?
Especially on Icor's side. If the guy really thinks that
Yeah.
he's Traken's lawyer and he's like only refers to him as Jew
Right.
and talks about how he can hear his heartbeat, I'd be like, sir, I'm sorry. I think you've misled us and you're not
But
actually an attorney.
on the other side, the other guy totally can confesses to a murder. He's like, I sliced up your partner and threw him in the
Right.
North Sea.
Like perhaps we should alert the authorities because
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Yeah. And then the episode ends. Well, near the end of the episode, Ephraim goes to an AA meeting, as we've mentioned, and kind of does more self-identifying as being kind of a dick, and just kind of gives this really sarcastic monologue as his sharing time, where usually it's kind of more earnest, at least in TV portrayals of AA meetings. It's more of
Right.
like a bearing your soul, and I guess he does that, but it's more of like there's really just a strong undercurrent slash overcurrent of sarcasm the entire time he's talking, which just continues. I mean, and in a way, in the book too, he's a very flawed character, and so they just keep hitting you with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the book he's flawed, but he's not unlikable. Or I feel like he's not as unlikable as he is in this show. Like
Yeah,
I feel like some of the things that they lay out, you have a lot more sympathy for him than you do in the show, or at least that I've been finding. So some of the choices that they've made in terms of showing you what F is like are a little interesting to me.
yeah. And I have to say, like having seen most of the season, it doesn't get much better. It does at
Interesting.
times. It does at times, but yeah, they've gone in a strange direction with him.
Huh.
Mm.
So, and then the final scene of this episode is Palmer and Fitzwilliam drive to the garage where Gus had dropped off the van with the box in it, which has the master, and he's like, because he wants to meet him. This is part of his bargain, and I really enjoyed the acting from what's Jonathan Hyde in this
Yeah,
scene.
he was
Yeah.
fantastic in this.
Great mix of kind of like fear and awe and excitement and again fear again. I think
Mostly, I think they came
mostly
back to
fear.
fear. Came back to fear a few times, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was I was like in a much better way to end an episode, honestly.
No, this is great, and it's that feeling where okay, you've gotten into bed with this thing, and you want to see it, but you don't want to see it. It was just this feeling of horror when he's like actually faced with it. And do you guys know who the master is played by, right?
Who is it?
He's Robert Malay. He's a WWE wrestler. You may know as Kurgan. But he's been in like a ton of stuff. As he was in Sherlock Holmes, and apparently,
They had the big fight like in the
yeah.
boatyard.
And
Yeah.
then actually, he actually accidentally punched out Robert Downey Jr. in that scene, and felt terrible about it, I guess. He was also in the 300, although his voice is actually done in this by Robert Atkin Downes, who he's been in like he's actually been as an actor in a ton of stuff, but you probably have heard his voice in a multitude of different things. So I just thought that was interesting because he also is a massive person.
Yeah, this is a big dude, 7 feet, 350 pounds.
Mm-hmm. He's ginormous.
It's bigger than the mountain.
But
Greg,
his that's not actually the final scene, correct?
is it not?
I thought the final scene was little girl
Oh
exsanguinates her own
yeah,
dad in the
Oh
bathtub.
yeah, I forgot
yeah,
about
yeah.
that
You're
too.
right. God
You
damn
know
it!
what?
Which is
Another
also
another
quite
show with two endings.
yeah.
Right. This I would agree with Stuart that I think this should happen, the last scene. I don't know that you needed the little girl thing could have come later.
I mean, it was creepy and effective, but you've already kind of like part of my problem is that I already kind of get the vampires. Like I get how they work. They suck people's blood out with like a basically like a worm thing that comes out of their throat. So like I'm kind of like when that scene with the little girl happened, like yeah, it was creepy, but it also felt like a little bit like kind of get to the point already. Like what happens next with the vampires? Basically, is what I want to know. Like
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
I know they drink blood.
The French guy could have just shown up dead, and we would know exactly what happened already.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Whereas this thing with Palmer is genuinely moving the plot forward and is I agree a much stronger place to end the episode. If they'd ended it just even without even showing the master, just showing the look on his face and then just like cut to black, like that's fucking awesome. That'd have been amazing.
Yeah.
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 Well, so it's a show that in this strangely, even though it's like the story is very well established, still finding its legs at this point by the end of episode 2. But I will encourage both of you to see more of it because certainly by like episodes 6 or 7, it really has some really good episodes, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly as I continue to watch it. And HA and I are going to continue talking about it. Kyle, you're more than welcome to come back, but
Absolutely.
you do have some busy times ahead of you, I think.
Busy couple weeks, but I'll try to. It's all aired at this point, right?
Hmm.
It,
So it's
either it
all
has or
kind of
it's
out
about
there.
to. Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, I'll keep up. Maybe I can join for some stuff later in the season.
that would be awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So unless we have anything else to share, do we?
I don't think so. I think we're finished with sharing time.
Okay, sharing time's over. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Reanimated. Be sure to join us again next time when HA and I start discussing episodes 3 and 4 of The Strain. And in the meantime, you can reach out to us via our show notes and leave us a comment at reanimatedpodcast.com. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or tweet with us at reanimatedpcast. And thank you so much for listening. And take it easy. We're out of here.
Ciao. Sorry, I was waiting for Kyle to say goodbye or something.
I wasn't sure whether it was a goodbye, whether everyone said goodbye or just Stuart said goodbye. But see ya.
Yeah, no, we all like to say goodbye in our own way.
Sometimes Stuart sings goodbye.
It's
Sometimes.
been fun.